At the front of the field, with Max running away with the title and Checo coming under pressure for underperforming, there isn't really any stakes in the teammate battle at Red Bull. That is why it makes it all the more ironic that, despite usually the stakes and pressure getting higher the further up the grid you go, in my opinion, the most important teammate battle to watch in the second half of the season will be at the team that currently sits dead last in the Constructors' Championship at AlphaTauri. There is an opportunity at Red Bull to drive a race-winning car in 2025 or even as early as 2024. That potential open seat has created an opportunity, and where there's opportunity, there is always competition. Both Ricciardo and Tsunoda have something to prove, something to fight for with a race-winning seat on the line, and that is why beating the other is more important than anything else. Despite Yuki's impressive start with 2 points finishes and 3 P11 finishes just out of the points in the first 5 races, with De Vries struggling in the other car, I don't think either AlphaTauri or Red Bull were entirely convinced that the car was as bad as it was, and that Yuki was just doing an exceptional job in making it a points contender. Dropping Nick De Vries was undoubtedly the right choice, although, as I have talked about in previous videos, there have to be questions about why he was hired in the first place, and what was his real purpose if not just a seat filler who could be dropped at any moment. Bringing in Ricciardo made a lot of sense because he was clearly looking for a way back into Formula 1. Red Bull also wanted to assess how he'd perform after struggling at McLaren, and despite Ricciardo's tainted reputation, he could still be used as a proven benchmark to see how good Yuki has been and how bad the AlphaTauri really is, if at all. The first 2 races have been a great example of hopefully how close and how important this head-to-head battle will be. In Hungary, Ricciardo came back with a bang, out-qualifying Yuki right from the off, which immediately put pressure on the Japanese driver, and then in the race, despite being taken out by Zhou on lap 1, Ricciardo had a very impressive comeback drive to P13. In Belgium, however, the momentum shifted the other way. Ricciardo made a mistake in qualifying extending track limits, which knocked him out of Q1, and it was Yuki this time who stringed everything together, qualifying in P11, and then even though he got overtaken late on by both Ocon and Stroll, he still managed to hold on to score a point. That 10th place finish for Yuki was massive in terms of giving him a mental boost. Being out-qualified and beaten by a driver who has just stepped into the car and also has a lot of emotional momentum behind him from both the fans and also the team can definitely play mind games on you. For Yuki to immediately bounce back the way he did showed a lot of mental toughness because he more than anyone else understands what Ricciardo being there means, and he also understands how him being beaten by Ricciardo would look. The reason why I think this head-to-head is so important is that even though Red Bull can retain both of these drivers at AlphaTauri in 2024, I just don't think it makes any sense as a driver lineup with all of the Red Bull juniors who are waiting in the wings for an opportunity in Formula 1. Regardless of who beats who, if both Ricciardo and Yuki are retained and someone like Lawson is passed over again, then it seriously calls into question what's the point of having so many drivers in the Red Bull program, and what's the point of having a sister team to funnel young drivers into Formula 1 if you're not going to give them an opportunity. At the heart of this battle, and why I think it will be so exciting, is my feeling that by the end of the season, one of these drivers has got to go. Helmut Marko has said in the past that the entire point of AlphaTauri is for young drivers to prove that they can be Grand Prix winners at Red Bull. With that in mind, if Yuki beats Ricciardo, then surely that moves him to the front of the queue in terms of potential replacements for Perez in 2025. And in that case, what's then the point of keeping Ricciardo at AlphaTauri for another season in 2024 alongside Yuki? However, if Ricciardo beats Yuki, then what is the point of Red Bull keeping Yuki for next season? In that scenario, Ricciardo would prove to Red Bull that at the very least he is still a very capable driver, even in a poor midfield car. And if he is still better than Yuki is after 3 seasons in Formula 1, then what's the point in keeping Yuki? Surely then, for 2024, Ricciardo should be retained as the experienced driver to keep that pressure on Perez, and alongside him the team should start giving an opportunity to the next generation of Red Bull drivers with Liam Lawson. Yuki has developed massively as a driver, but if Red Bull can't see him as a future Red Bull driver alongside Max, and then especially if he gets beaten by Ricciardo in the second half of the season, then why should he still be there? Keep in mind, over the past few years there has been a Honda motivation to keep Yuki because although he was a Red Bull Junior, he has been affiliated with Honda since he started racing in cars. With Honda joining Aston Martin in 2026, and with Red Bull powertrains partnering up with Ford, there isn't really that same Honda motivation to keep Yuki, even if he does get beaten by Ricciardo. And even then, Red Bull still have a Yumi Iwasa in Formula 2, who is the next Honda prospect in line. What that essentially means is that the only way for Yuki to justify his position at the team, his position within Red Bull, and also his position within Formula 1 is for him to beat Ricciardo. There's no doubt that more of the pressure is going to be on Yuki. For Daniel, off the back of that Hungary performance alone, I think he's proven that he is still a very capable Grand Prix driver, and even if it doesn't work out at AlphaTauri, I still think that the likes of Williams, Alfa Romeo, who are going to become Audi, and even Haas would jump at the opportunity to sign him if they could afford him and if they could see that he has the motivation to be there. Yuki's stock feels like it's lower outside of AlphaTauri compared to within Red Bull itself. He's not an 8-time Grand Prix winner, and even from a commercial standpoint, we saw when Ricciardo's return was announced that Daniel is still one of the most popular drivers on the grid, and Yuki's commercial value to a team just isn't anywhere near that. How Red Bull will judge which driver is stronger than the other will also be very interesting to watch. I don't think you can just say that it'll be based purely off points, because if, for example, Ricciardo is consistently dominating Yuki, but then Yuki grabs a crazy P5 finish in one race that puts him ahead of Ricciardo overall, what do you do then? Both of these drivers are going to be judged through the lens of how would they perform if they would be put into a Red Bull under the massive levels of pressure and expectation that comes with racing for a championship-winning team and being teammates with Max Verstappen. Ricciardo already starts with more credit in the bank in that regard because Red Bull know exactly what he's capable of when there are wins on the table, even up against Max. That same credit and trust in Ricciardo's ability is what got him back into the Red Bull fold, and it's that same intrigue of him potentially still being good enough to return that's got him this opportunity at AlphaTauri. Or whether Yuki mentally is strong enough to be put into that Red Bull frying pan, I think is the biggest question that will be playing on the minds of Horner and Marco, even if he does outscore Ricciardo. Being at Red Bull is all about dealing with pressure, how you compare against Max, how you react to constant speculation about your future, even when you do have a contract, and how you react to being in the Horner-Marco environment, which, unless your name is Max Verstappen, I wouldn't say is the most supportive. Regardless of who comes out on top, looking at how Ricciardo has hit the ground running and how Yuki was able to bounce back at Spa, this should be one of the closest teammate pairings in the second half of the season. I don't know about anyone else, but throughout Hungary and Spa, I was always keeping an eye out in qualifying and even the race of where Tsunoda was relative to Ricciardo and vice versa. Everyone knows how much is on the line, everyone knows what's at stake for both of these drivers, and even if they're only fighting to get out of Q1, there is going to be a lot of eyeballs on how they compare. In terms of what I think will happen and who I think will come out on top, I have honestly gone backwards and forwards so many times, but at the moment I still think Yuki will just edge out Ricciardo in terms of results, but I am not sure if that alone will give Red Bull the answers that they want, that he's a future Red Bull driver. As for who will be signed on for 2024 out of Tsunoda, Ricciardo, Lawson, or another driver that might be in the mix that we don't even know about yet, this is where I wouldn't be surprised if the decision is only made near or after Abu Dhabi. Red Bull have the luxury of multiple drivers wanting to be in the AlphaTauri, And so there's no sense in making a snap decision. Letting things play out by giving Yuki and Daniel the entire second half of the season, and giving Lawson that same time as well to win the Super Formula title, I think is the most likely scenario. In a season that has no real title fight or intrigue up at the front, it's so interesting how even in an AlphaTauri, there is so much at stake with a potential Red Bull seat on the line, and then when you add into the equation that one of these drivers might not even be on the grid in 2024 off the back of what happens this season, there is no doubt that this is going to be the most important teammate battle to watch. As for who is going to come out on top and what will happen to Tsunoda and Ricciardo, I'll leave that over to you in the comments. Well, there you have it. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you did enjoy it and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe. That would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.